And I can't hide. These growing pains are keeping me up at night.
The information that we share today is from our own personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions as it may pertain to your condition.
Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm thrilled to introduce this week's guest, Casey Bosloo. Casey is a strategic communications major at the University of Missouri and arthritis advocate and shares awareness of JIA. So, hi Casey, I'm really excited to have you on today. Can you start off by introducing yourself?
As you said, I'm Casey. I am a college something just because I transferred into my program, so I don't really know what I am right now. And I'm 22, so yeah, I'm just chilling.
Oh, wonderful. What is your specific condition? I know I mentioned you're an arthritis advocate, but what type of arthritis do you have?
Yeah, so I have juvenile idiopathic polyarticular arthritis. Basically just means I was diagnosed as a kid. Doctors don't know how I got it or why I have it. Polyarticular just means it affects more than 4 joints. And then arthritis is that lovely autoimmune condition that I've got.
Exactly. Wonderful. It sounds amazing because I have that too. All right, so this is a great discussion because we'll be able to kind of bond on something we both have. All right, so let's get started. What age were you diagnosed with JIA?
So I was officially diagnosed at like my steroid injections the day before I turned 14, but I've been having symptoms since I was about 7 years old.
So what symptoms started first appearing at the age of 7?
I had these things called, I called them log legs just because my knees were so swollen you couldn't tell the difference between my thighs and my calves. I couldn't run, couldn't play very much. If we went shopping, like to the mall or something, I'd have to take a lot of breaks. More often than not, I'd be sitting on the benches with old ladies and I'd make friends, which is nice, but still wasn't really fun for like, a 10-year-old.
Yeah. It's not fun when you can't do the things that, teenagers and young people do. It kind of sucks, but we make the best out of the situation. And I think that's what you've done in a lot of the things that we're going to talk about later. So, how did you know? Because you had symptoms from the age of 7, but when did you actually see a healthcare professional and how did you know that you had to go see one?
So when I first started having symptoms at 7, I told my mom, and my mom was like, oh crap, because she also has JA. So she knew the symptoms. So she took me to my primary. My primary referred me to Children's Mercy in Kansas City. Well, the rheumatologist I saw there dismissed all my positive lab work. He dismissed everything, basically just saying I was having growing pains and making it up, which I was ANA positive, which is, I'm pretty sure that inflammation level in the blood, which doesn't happen very often with JA patients. They're not usually ANA positive. So that was extremely disheartening. But I finally got to seeing my previous rheumatologist because I kind of aged out. When I was started seeing her just around when I turned 13. I actually went to my primary because I had this really weird bump on my wrist and it wouldn't go down. My friend noticed it in movies. She was like poking at it and she was like, what the heck is that? And I was like, I don't know. So went to my primary. He's like, we're going to send you back to Children's Mercy, but there's a different rheumatologist that we're going to send you to. She was like, oh, bless. Thank you. So go there. She's looking at my wrist. She's not really concerned about my wrist. She's looking at my knees and she's looking at my lab work. She's like, what's going on here? So she started basically doing what the first rheumatologist should have done. And then I started getting my treatments and here I am today.
That's honestly like a very, long journey you've been through.
Yeah.
And It sucks that the first rheumatologist was unable to, you know, actually believe you. I've heard so many stories where a lot of doctors just don't believe their patients sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's not their
Mhm.
fault, but sometimes it's like just if the patient's telling you something, please believe us, you know. And
Yeah.
sometimes we think that way. Um, you
Yeah.
mentioned that your mom has juvenile arthritis. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. So at the age of 7, you're experiencing all of these symptoms. Did your mom like kind of know that this might actually be arthritis because of what she experienced?
Yeah, actually, my primary doctor calls my mom like I don't actually know what he specifically calls her, but he trusts my mom's gut because usually with my mom's gut, she's 97% of the time right. So she kind of went to him and she was like, hey, this isn't right. I started having these symptoms when she was like a teenager or something. And she was like, I'm worried that this is what it's going to be. Can we do some labs? Can we figure out what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I think, your parents, they live with you. They know what's going on. They make that, decision. I think most of my decisions in terms of like my arthritis care were not me making those
Mhm.
decisions. They were my parents making those decisions. So I think at a young age,
Yeah.
yeah, we can definitely like, rely on them. So I know you've experienced like your 7 years of not being diagnosed. How frustrating
Mhm.
is that? Like I know you're 7, like you're really young at that time, but you probably feel a certain way. So I'd love to hear like what your emotions and feelings, like what was happening in your head while you were going through this.
Um, well, deep down, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have anybody other than my mom to back me up on it, which it's kind of an isolating feeling because you know something's wrong, but there's nothing you can do about it. But maybe take some ibuprofen, maybe have an ice pack, maybe have a heat pack. There's not really much you can do. I couldn't do a lot of sports playing like growing up. I really wanted to play basketball, but it just got to the point where it just hurt too much and I couldn't physically run just because my knees were so swollen and I couldn't bend them. Um, in middle school, I got bullied a lot just because like I couldn't do what the other kids were doing, which kind of sucked. But then again, who didn't have a bad middle school experience? My mom always knew deep down, she's like, I know you've got this and we're not going to give up on it. But there was only so much we could do. And, doctor visits are so expensive. And then we lived an hour from Kansas City. So it was even driving was just so much work and so much money. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was about 10 or 12. So money was really tight, especially since my dad was an educator. So it's just one of those things where it really sucks. But looking back on it, like, it's just the way it was.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you mentioned that because like so in Canada, like we don't have to pay for, doctor's visits because it's covered by insurance. So and OHIP and stuff, which is like the Ontario health plan.
Yeah.
But that might suck because every single time you have to like go to the doctor, it's like, inside your mind, you're spending money and you might even feel bad to the point where sometimes you wouldn't even want to go because you're like, is this like worth it? Because it's actually expensive. I've heard a lot, like my cousins live in the States. So I know that every time they go to like a doctor's appointment, it's so expensive.
Yeah. Like I remember like my first because I used to when I was getting diagnosed with my second trip to Children's Mercy, I was on my dad's insurance, which it was great that we had insurance, but it was still $60 a pop. And then I had to go there every single month. So my dad would have to take a day off work. We would have to drive the hour, which gas was expensive during that time. So probably $20 for that. Then we had a $60 copay at the doctor's appointment. Then we had lab works, which I was seen at the normal hospital, and the outpatient labs are charged differently there. So it cost a couple $100 for labs. And then we had to do the drive back. And then we mostly spent the day up there. So then we would have to figure out lunch. And it was just a pain in the rear.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of planning, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't want to go every single month if I knew that this had to be the plan, especially like parents taking off of work. And that's like how you make your income, and support your family. And it's like with the additional cost of like paying for medications. I don't know if you had to go through any of that. But I'd love to hear if paying for medications was the thing and with external stressors that you didn't, I'd love to hear.
Medications, at least I know here, are just outrageous compared to any other country in the world. But I was on methotrexate, which I don't actually remember how much that medication cost, just because I was on it when I was so young and my dad just picked up my prescriptions.
Same.
Then I was on Enbrel, which was a specialty pharmacy, which I had to deal with a Credo, and that was not a pleasant experience for me. But that cost a couple grand. Got switched to Plaquenil, which that medication that was all over the news
Oh
for
yeah.
so long here in the States. Um, I got feelings about those, but that's something completely different. But then I don't really know how much that one costs. I think it was like $10 or $12. Right now I'm on Humira, which is like a copay assistance with Humira. So I only have to pay $5 for my medication versus like $12 or $1,500 right now for here in the States. So
I just wanted to know because you just mentioned a bunch of medication that you've been on, and most of them kind of failed. What medication worked the best on you? Probably the one that you're on right now, but also what medication caused the worst reaction or like, some like next level something. I'd love to know if you had any of those experiences.
well, boy, oh boy, do I. I actually have a funny one because I was on Remicade for one infusion session, but that's like a whole story. So I'll get there in a minute. But so the medications I was on methotrexate, I was on hydroxychloroquine, which is Plaquenil, is just the off name. I was on Enbrel, and I'm on Humira currently. I was on a mix of Humira and Plaquenil for a little bit, and then I just told my doctor straight, I was like, I'm tired of taking pills. Can I get off of this? So right now I'm just on Humira, and so far I'm medicated remission, which just basically means as long as I take my medication, I'm good to go. My arthritis isn't going to be active, although I'm in a really bad flare right now, so I'm on a prednisone boost. So I've had the most luck with Humira, even though I was so dead against going on there because I heard so many horror stories. But my worst reaction ever to medication was Remicade. So I was talking to my doctor, my arthritis moved into my spine, and we were discussing options. And I was like, I am not going on Humira. I've heard so many bad stories. It hurts so much. I am not going on it. So she said, okay, since it's in your spine, we can get the insurance to improve Remicade infusions. I was like, cool, let's go. So I have my infusion on September 23rd of 2017 in my local hospital because I didn't want to drive up to Kansas City for the day to get it done. Joseph Mercy was like, yeah, we can send the orders to Bothwell. Yep, I'm going to name drop because they almost killed me, but I will get there in a minute. We go into the cancer unit at my local hospital. They're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you a big dose of Benadryl, which is standard procedure. We're going to hook you up to this IV, and then you're going to be in and out in about 3 hours. So I'm like, what? 3 hours doesn't sound right because my rheumatologist told me it would be 8 to 9 hours. And they're like, nope, we'll have you out in 3. So I'm like, okay, I don't trust this, but okay. So I'm in the hospital, done with my IV. So I didn't have allergic reaction there. So they sent me home. Next day, September 24th, 2017, my older sister's birthday. I have a band competition in my town. So I'm like, okay, cool. We're hosting. I was in percussion. I was a section leader. So I had to go and run, basically moving the front ensemble instruments in and out of the field. I was in charge of that, getting it going and basically keeping time. So I pop up there in the morning to drop off what I was supposed to drop off for the hospitality room for like the coaches and stuff. And I go to my friend's mom and I'm like, hey, Amy, I'm not feeling so good. I think I just got allergies because, it's the fall. And she's like, are you sure it's just allergies and not a reaction with your medicine? I'm like, yeah, just because my throat's a little itchy and it's been itchy like this before, but it hasn't been in a while. So she's like, Casey, you're gonna go home. I'm calling your mom and you guys are gonna go to the hospital. So I'm like, what? So my friend's mom, Amy, is calling my mom because they're good friends. And so I'm driving home. I'm a little worried, but I'm trying to be chill because I'm like, you know what? This is fine. Everything's fine. It's okay. So I get home. My mom is freaking out. She gives me like 5 Benadryls. My dad throws me in the car, rushes me to the emergency room because what I didn't know is that my mom called the emergency nurse line at Children's Mercy. And she was telling them what my friend's mom told her. And they were like, give her Benadryl, take her to the ER now. She's going to go into shock.
Oh my
So,
God.
yeah. So I get to the emergency room and I'm going to check in and they're like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I feel fine, but my throat's itchy and my tongue's getting a little swollen. And my dad's basically like, she's downplaying it. We think she's going into shock, that Children's Mercy told us to come here straight away. So I bypassed everybody in the ER and I get sent straight back into a room. They hook me up with IVs and everything. My body's going more into shock. So I'm freaking out. My dad's freaking out. And then the doctor comes in and I have the audacity to tell him, okay, dude, I got a band competition today. So we got to hurry up so I can get out of here because I got stuff to do today.
Oh my.
Yeah, after like I got all of that medication and adrenaline and all that jazz, I go back to my band competition and I proceed to go back into shock because I overdid it at the competition.
Oh no, that's so bad. I feel like if I'm being honest, like if you really like doing something, like you have a passion or something, you will do anything to make it on that day and to do what you gotta do. If you hated it, you would not be there and you'd be like, okay, let's just continue with what's going on.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I've already been dealing with arthritis for so long. I'm just like, you know what? I can ignore it. It's fine. Let me just do my band stuff.
Yeah, no,
Except,
it's not
when,
fine. It's not
oh,
fine.
no. But then, like, I stopped breathing in the middle of playing. And then my band director's like, oh no. So they had to call my dad. They threw me in an ice bath. Oh my gosh, it was a whole mess.
You mentioned middle school and how, it was kind of challenging because people were bullying you. I know it's a really hard topic to talk about, but I'm really interested to hear what were some of the comments that people made that were positive or negative and kind of the environment you were in at school.
A lot of my teachers were super supportive. Nobody really made fun of me, like teachers wise. They're like, you're such an inspiration. I'm so proud of you. You're so resilient, which I really hate that word now that I'm older. So like the instructors and everybody like with the school were great because they also knew my dad, because my dad worked in the school for over 20 years. So everybody knew who my dad was.
Oh,
And then in turn, everybody knew who I was. My best friends were great. My friend Sam is probably is and will always be my biggest supporter. We're actually still best friends to this day. She's the one who's pushed me to do my physical therapy and my occupational therapy, and she's the one who was there to help me take my medicines when I didn't want to take them. And she was right by my side when I was in the ice bath when I had that really bad reaction. I remember a part in like 7th or 8th grade. I was hanging out with one of my friends after he auditioned for a play just because his mom was giving me a ride home because he lived across the street. And one of his friends came up and he looks at me and he's like, why are you hanging out with her? And my friend was like, well, she's my friend. Like, we're neighbors. Like,
yeah.
what's it? And then he straight up just looks at me. He's like, I don't associate with handicapped people.
Excuse me?
And yeah, exactly. Right. I'm like, the audacity, sir. Which again, like we're impressionable at that age. And that really hurt. And what hurt even more was like their family was one of the like a more prominent family in town. So there was somebody that everybody knew. He was like one of his family members was like one of the judges in town. Like they had a reputation for being good, accepting, nice people. And this kid just straight up said, I'm not going to associate with you because you're disabled technically. That's one that's kind of stuck with me for years. It doesn't bother me now, but then that really, really hurt, you know.
Yeah, I can relate with that. Like, especially in grade 8, I had like the worst comments ever because my fingers are swollen. And people just used to call me like lazy or like, apparently I did some inappropriate stuff for my fingers to be swollen. Like, I don't need to hear things like that in grade 8. But people came up to me and said those things. And obviously, it hurt at that time. And it is something that I think all of us who receive those comments will also always kind of have those with us like in the back of my mind to explain like our stories, but in the end of the day, like there's a reason why they're not talking to us still, and they're just really bad people, and it sucks sometimes when you have to deal with all that, but we make the best out of this disease, and I think that it's really important that many people know that even though you deal with those negative comments, there's still positives out there. Like you mentioned, your friend supported you a lot and still does to this day. So you have those really good people in your life still supporting you with the disease you have. And I think that's all that matters.
For me, like it was great. Like I had a huge support system. Like my band directors went above and beyond. Like they would help me with fundraisers for like Arthritis Foundation or anything like that. But what still like was really hard was just people looking at you in public. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but like, I'd be this like 15-year-old kid and I would have to use a wheelchair at a park. I would have to use a wheelchair to get around like a theme park with my friends, or use my mom as a crutch just so I could walk from store to store. And I just remember like all those looks, like, what the heck's wrong with her? And like, not really alienating me, but like looking at me like I'm not really like a freak show, but just something that's not normal. When it's like, I'm just a person, like I'm still here. Just because I have an invisible illness doesn't mean anything to you. And like, you can explain that so many times, but not everybody's going to listen and not everybody cares.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the people that don't care, they don't need to, we don't need to like waste our time on them. Honestly, like you said it once, it's done. That's their problem now. We can move on. But like aside from that, like I didn't have any, I was never in a wheelchair and I never had like crutches or cane. So it was very, very invisible to the point where if you just saw me walking, you wouldn't see anything. But when it came to kind of not being able to write during class, that's when it became more visible, but people still couldn't see why. They just call me lazy. They're like, why aren't you writing? Like, we don't see anything wrong with you, right? And that's when it's like, it's invisible, you can't see it, but I'm in so much pain right now. And I'm so glad that you didn't have any like, teacher issues, because I know like, especially for me, like I did have teachers that were, the most supportive, but I also had those teachers that were, oh, you don't have arthritis, it's for old people. And you wouldn't expect that from teachers because you think they're more mature about it. Oh no, I feel like I had the worst comments from teachers rather than peers. So it's just like a whole totally different situation. But I think like special education is something that I had like accommodations, and like the teachers that worked there were so nice. Did you have any like, those type of teachers that kind of helped you in school?
In the US, at least, I don't know how it is in Canada, but my dad is actually a special education like educator. He's worked in sped ed for like 20 some odd years. So my dad is very well versed in like IEPs, 504s, and all of that jazz. So I never qualified for an IEP, but I did qualify for 504, which is basically just educational accommodations. Basically talk to my doctor. It's like, hey, this is what I kind of need to be successful in school. And we just kind of went from there. And I was involved with all of my 504 meetings, like from the get-go, just because they started when I was like 13, 14 years old. And my mom's very much of, you're going to advocate for yourself, whether you want to or not. And that's kind of what I became, like encouraging people to advocate for yourself, even though you don't want to, but nobody knows you better than you, right?
Yeah.
So I had like use of computers in the classroom. I had a rolling backpack when I was on a weight limit. I've had for like band, like I wasn't allowed to lift or move my instruments, so somebody else would come and help me. I got basically an unlimited hall pass to the nurse's office um, to go get heat packs, to get medicine or whatever. I had excused absences, which were great with the doctor's appointments and flares, because a lot of times, in the winter months, at least for me, it would be a little harder to get moving in the morning, but I would just come in later to school and they'd be like 5:04 and I'm like, that's me. Extensions on homework assignments, tests, stuff like that, because Embroil gave me extremely bad brain fog. Like I straight up forgot how to do kindergarten math one day. Like I was just looking at numbers and I couldn't read it. So I had all that. And then my mom is in civil rights. So I kind of got all of that extensive knowledge.
That's so amazing. Having, special education, educator, and then like civil rights and like, all that stuff. It's so important to be knowledgeable about that, because if you are knowledgeable about that, you just got this, you have the power. And sometimes even if you are knowledgeable, sometimes you don't have the power. As soon as you kind of got your diagnosis, I mean, I have multiple questions about just like, mental health at different stages of your life, because, your mental health, fluctuates. So how did you feel at the time of your diagnosis? What was kind of going on?
I remember just breaking down in the car because it was like a bittersweet moment, just because it's like, yes, finally we're figuring out what's going on. We're going to be able to try to fix it. But then at that same time, it's like, oh my gosh, I have a chronic illness and this is never going to leave me. Like I'm either always going to be on medication or I'm always going to be going to the doctor. And it was scary, just because, I'm this kid and this just got like thrown in my face. And I'm just like, what the heck am I supposed to do? And I wasn't the best at like expressing my emotions then or processing them. So I just remember pretending to be asleep in the car and then just crying so my mom wouldn't ask me questions. So I remember that vividly, just because like driving home on Highway 50 from Kansas City to Astoria, I was just crying the entire way.
Honestly, I experienced something very, very similar. Like, it's really weird, the whole like breaking down of the car, because same. I remember when I was diagnosed, my mom came to like the school parking lot and she was like picking me up from school. She told me like about my blood test and like I had arthritis. I get into the car, start crying. And sometimes people tell you that it's gonna be okay, but it's not. Yes, it will later
Yeah.
on. Yes, it will later on. It might get somewhat better, which is it's at right now, but it took like 5 years for me to feel like, okay, it's like a little bit better, but I still can't do so many things.
Yeah.
It's hard. And the whole like it does take a really big toll on your mental health at that point. Like I know in grade 8, I didn't really think about mental health. I was just like, I'm crying right now, whatever. I just gotta deal with it. But I want to know, how did you keep up and make sure that your mental health and mental well-being was okay and you were taking care of yourself?
I'm really open about talking about anything like with my medical issues, with my mental health or anything like that. But I can guarantee I was in denial that I had any mental health issues until 2020. So from literally 2013, 2014 to 2020, I was in denial. I had extremely toxic friendships and relationships in between there, of course. But I just denied everything. Like I just pretended everything was okay. I put on my mask every day. It's like, all right, we're going to pretend to be happy. We're going to pretend everything is okay, just so people don't bother you with questions. Because when people ask you questions, that's when you can't lie. And that's when you can't fake it, is because they're directly asking you, like, what's going on? And it's harder to lie when it's a direct question. Like, sure, you can be like, oh, I'm fine. But I've looked at pictures of me in high school and my skin was so translucent. Like, I had no color. I had nothing. Like, my hair was so dull. Like, I had bags under my eyes that were like at least the length of a quarter. Like, they were huge. And I was just out here like, I'm fine. Everything's great. I'm doing great. But in reality, I was dying inside. And like my brain didn't know how to process it. So I just ignored it.
Yeah. Sometimes you're always in denial because you don't want to accept it, but also when you accept it, sometimes you get even more sad about it. And I know like especially in like the beginning of the years when I was diagnosed, like the first 3 years, there were so many instances where, I would just cry because it does affect me and impact me, but I just sometimes don't want people asking me like, "Are you okay? Blah blah blah. Can I help you? Blah blah blah." Or like, "You're gonna be fine." Like, no, I'm not. Leave me alone, please. Let me cry. Let me just like deal with my feelings. And I think sometimes you just need to cry and let it out.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Just like letting your feelings out.
Obviously letting them out in a healthy way is great.
Yeah.
Um, my friends and I, we would have cry sessions where we would just like everything would just be overwhelming and we would just sit together, watch The Notebook and just cry. Just throw on a sad movie so it gives you just a little extra motivation to cry. Um, but as for like people just like always bothering you with questions, like that's the whole reason like I just pretended everything was okay because they didn't really care. They were just asking so they would feel better about themselves. At least that's what I
Exactly.
was thinking.
Yeah.
And I ran into that a lot with my church. Like, well, not my church now, but like my old church, where everybody would be like, "Are you doing okay? Like, how can I help you?" And I'm like, "You really don't care that much." So I would just be like, "I'm fine, but thank you." Or like, "Yeah, you can pray for my doctor's appointment, but I know it's not going to look good." And then it would be like, "Yep, another is affected. So we have to switch up your medicines again." And it was just that kind of negative optimism is what I was facing a lot with like my mental health was trying to ignore it, which I do not recommend for anybody. Like obviously get your people that support you the best. Like
Mhm.
for me, it was my best friend Sam, my friend McKenna, who's actually in medical school, my older sister, who would find vines for me to watch while I had my shots done because they scared me and made me sick. So she'd be like, "Hey, look at this vine of this cat doing the wiggle." Like it's just stupid stuff like that. But that's what's kind of like really, I think, what kept me from going overboard with my mental health. And then obviously 2020 hit with COVID and everything. It kind of really messed me up because I'm a very sociable person and I love being around people. So yeah, it's just stuff like that.
Yeah, especially I know for me, the way I like let things out or like, make myself happy or need to when I do need to get my, rant out. I just talk to my friends about it. Like my close friends, they're always willing to listen. And like one of my friends and I would kind of just like exchange. Like we know that if he knows that if I like rant to him about my issues, like he's allowed to tell me about his problems too. Like it's a two-way thing. Like it just doesn't
Oh
need to be
yeah.
so that way I don't feel like, oh my God, I'm just dumping this on him and he probably hates me. So like
Exactly.
you get those friends where it's like, yeah, they may not have arthritis, but they've been with you for a while and they're really nice to talk to and they actually care about you, unlike random people that are just like, are you okay? Like, can I do something?
My friend Sam, she would basically bully me into doing my physical therapy. Like she would literally be like, "Casey, did you do your PT today?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to do it." And she's like, "Casey, you got to do your PT or you're going to get worse." Or like my friend McKenna, like she's in med school and she was doing all this research on medications and how to like on different like various treatments and she was trying to understand what was going on. And it's just those kind of people that, genuinely care about you. And also like it's a reciprocal kind of like friendship where like I'll voice like my medical frustrations or what I'm dealing with to my friend Sam. And then she would voice her issues too. And it's just, like that healthy friendship relationship with people. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. So let's
Yeah.
kind of dive really quickly into some initiatives that you've been working on. I know that you work alongside Pediatric Rheumatology Care and Outcomes Improvement Network, so the PR Coin. And just to give everyone a little bit of a background, This is a group of pediatric rheumatology clinics working together to improve care for children with rheumatic conditions. So when did you start getting involved with this network, and what do you kind of do?
My mom is actually a part of PR Coin. So she was like, hey, we need a patient like opinion, or like we need some patient input. So I'm like, okay, mom, which, that's what my mom did. She would find stuff. She'd be like, hey, you got to do this. So I think that started like about junior or senior year of my high school. So like 2017, 2018, one of those two. I don't quite remember, but I started working with them, just basically giving like the patient perspective. So I would basically go up on these like kind of like patient panels, and doctors, parents would ask me questions, and I would just give my honest opinion. Like one doctor was, how can we like make you feel more comfortable? And I'm like, well, just be straight honest with us. Like, don't beat around the bush. Just be like, okay, this is what we can do, and this is how we can do it. Versus like, well, there's this option and we could try it, but you don't have to do it. Like, no, just give it to us straight. Like, that's how we'll respect you. I talked a bit with mental health for like just barely briefly. But since then I've gotten just a little bit more vocal and a little bit more involved, just because like I'm a full-time student. I work almost full-time right now. So right now, PR Coin is actually coming up with a patient advocacy team, which called PAT, which I love it so much. So we're just basically like a group of patients ages 14 to 24. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who's not actually at a PR Coin site, just because I'm kind of like trying to help. I'm not really trying to like take over the whole thing and run the whole shindig. Like, no, I'm just there to help and provide a little bit of insight, just because I went through the college transition. I've transitioned from peds to adult care. So right now we're actually just working on coming up with some accommodations, like a little, not really like a checklist, but kind of like an explanation or examples, or just, just a little help with going from high school to university or college. And so it's got examples like making sure like where an urgent care is, or maybe if you're severely affected and your arthritis is really, really bad and not under control yet, maybe choosing a college that's close to home or close to your doctor, stuff like that. Basically going through accommodations with college, the disabilities office, housing accommodations, dining accommodations, stuff like that. And maybe like how to choose your classes, how to consider like, is my campus really hilly? Is my campus flat? Is it large? Is it small? Stuff like that.
Okay. They're doing a lot, and you're helping out a lot too. So that's amazing. It's definitely, very time consuming to manage like being a full-time student and a job and your own disease and helping out with initiatives. And I know you're involved with other initiatives. You've done some work with Arthritis Foundation, which is really cool. And I kind of wanted to wrap things up by asking you, because you've been such a big advocate throughout your JIA journey, where you've advocating for your own health, but also you started advocating for others by being involved for this initiative. So what is one message you would like to spread through advocacy?
Being an advocate is so important, just because nobody knows you better than you. I hate to say it, but like I'm just going to be upfront. Like, our parents aren't always going to be there for us. Like when we move on, when we become adults, nobody's going to be there to advocate for us. So we got to have our own voice. So we got to know what we need. We got to know our disease. We got to know how to take care of things. And we got to know how to speak up for ourselves, because if you're not going to do it, then nobody else is going to. And I think this is so important. And a lot of pediatric patients I don't think they really understand that importance yet, just because a lot of the patients I know, they're just like preteens. Like, they don't know it because they haven't had to experience that yet, because their parents have, always had their back. But there's going to be one day where no one's going to have your back but you. And I think it's just so important just to be able to understand, explain it, and just straight up be like, okay, this is what I need right now. and we got to get it done. And just being kind of like a little stick in the mud.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Casey, for coming on to Take a Pain Check today. I really had a wonderful conversation with you. We were able to touch so many different topics, like being undiagnosed for several years, which is not that great. Mental
Nope.
health, you know, remission with medication, how you are advocating a lot, you're involved in PR Coin, and it was just such a wonderful conversation. So thank you for coming on. Everyone, like, comment, subscribe, check out Casey's social media channels, check out PR Coin. Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me up in the